You're queuing that one up. You used two terms that were sort of opposite sides of the same coin. One was problem and the other was opportunity. Maybe with that, when you go in and work with a client or even scoping a project with a client, what do you tend to focus on? Do you focus on that return on investment, and a small investment in the work that you do can drive substantial benefits, maybe along the four streams that we talked about before? Or do you frame it more as a problem, in which case, what are some of those hidden costs of manual work inside an organization? How do you approach that kind of a conversation?
I think it's both, and it's important to understand mostly the stakeholders that you're working with on what resonates more, because some people are frustrated with the way that they're doing their work and they want it to change, and other people are, we're looking at ways to change the way the organization is doing business. Maybe we want to reduce some costs, maybe we want to reallocate the value so we can get somebody doing something that's more important for our business. So I definitely see that like the decisions are, when we look at like financial impact, that's pretty big. The strategic impact, maybe we want to do something better than our competitors. We want to be faster. We want to have a more consistent process. Then we go on the strategic side of things. And then there's, I think, a lot of other downstream impacts we're seeing to these workflows as well. But I definitely think when we're meeting with our main stakeholders, we're looking at the financial and the strategic benefits the most, and looking at where we're trying to kind of fix their problem statement. And then when we're actually meeting with the people who are going to use or benefit from our workflow, we're more focused on the solution. How does it work? How does it function to save them time? And so I do find it's kind of a matter of understanding what they need to hear and who you're working with, so that we are getting the right message across at different levels of the organization.
It's probably a good segue into to a discussion about some diagnostics and how do you get started with something like this. In my experience, I'd say our firm's experience, when we start off with process-heavy projects where an organization is looking to get into process optimization or improve performance, we often see, not always, depends on the nature of the organization, but we often see some level of disconnect between the senior executives in an organization who have often pushed the manual, granular process work down to the front lines or the outer limits of the organization. Completely understandable given some of the complexities that they need to manage from the C-suite. But as you rightly pointed out, in a different way, a small process amplified over millions of repetitions can really add up to the bottom line. So when you get into a new project like this, how do you diagnose where to start? And then how do you communicate that with the people to be able to mobilize support for the work that you do?
Well, taking advantage of my expertise and experience for a moment, kind of have a hunch on some of those processes just with our nature being management consultants. But, I don't want to come in and just be immediately prescriptive. It's important to be a collaborative consultant and to kind of listen to those concerns and understand where the main pain points are. I think it can then leverage some of our experience and the workflows that we've built already to understand which ones might provide more value, be a quicker win, get our foot in the door to help them understand the work that we do. I go back to the time off request process again, but it's one of my best examples of an extremely common business problem that we see. And in one of our organizations, they have about 50 employees. Power Automate actually has a meter in it now, so we can set it up and say that each workflow run would save approximately half an hour at $30 an hour. And now it's reporting back that they're trending to save about $1,000 a month in their single process here of just a time off request that was traditionally written on a piece of paper, walked up the stairs, signed off by a manager, and then written on a whiteboard. Reasonably, that's a half-hour process. And I think looking at how that scales more, we have another customer who has really heavily documented the estimated time savings for all of their projects. And over the last 3 years, we've been able to unlock almost $2 million in extra value. 127% of the money they've given us, we've been able to give the organization back because we've kind of looked at all these little workflows that they've been doing for these simple forms and have identified a lot of opportunity for where that just, saves a little bit of time. And then when we start bringing in some data like that, we can start getting more buy-in through the organization. But finalizing up here on that time off request, it's a process everybody in the organization will eventually touch. And so it's a great one to start getting the gears turning for all levels of the organization to have some ideas for how, this was an improvement. Now I can also improve my truck inspections. I can improve this other paperwork I fill out.
So I love that. So I'm going to poke a little bit more at this, at a couple of the drivers of return on investment on this, because I got to believe that on one level, it's nice to be able to say, you know what, a paper-based exercise of simple reduction in manual steps on a time off process, for example, translates into X number of dollars. We certainly get into this space, but I'm curious about sort of what you would do next with that information, right? How do you actually help the organization